This youth entrepreneurship program was produced by the Northern California and Sacramento Regional Center for International Trade Development, a program of the Los Rios Community College District Workforce and Economic Development Program, and funded through a grant from the California Community College's Chancellor's Office Economic and Workforce Development Program. When doing business far from home, there is a different landscape, culture, laws, and norms that the global entrepreneur must educate themselves on quickly.
Today, with technology, I can be talking to China, the United Kingdom, Canada, Africa, all in the same day with the technology that we have. And so it's kind of, you just have to be global. You have to be e-commerce and you have to be global. Julia
Rhodes created Clean Slate out of a necessity for such a tool in her own classroom.
I was a teacher for 13, 14 years. I taught English, middle school, and there were just tools that were missing in my classroom. And I was one of those people that, being a teacher, being very resourceful, to say, well, if we didn't have it, let's make it, let's create it. And so this was one of those products that kind of took a life on of its own.
Not only did the product catch on in classrooms, but in the office and in entertainment.
So you'll find us almost on every movie set down in Hollywood and now all over the world.
Julia found an eager market outside the United States, but also learned quickly that she needed to protect herself legally when doing business internationally.
We had our trademarks here locally, but then I found out somebody was trying to take our trademark in China, and so I immediately had to jump on that, and we're still working on getting that back, but we have to have a Chinese patent attorney.
When selling your invention overseas, research that country's patent and trademark laws, because you may have to apply for separate patents in each country. Protection of your product is a big factor in doing business globally. But so is understanding current events and a country's cultural schedule.
Understanding the culture, knowing that this is October, this is Moon Festival. Nobody's going to be working, knowing when they're on and when they're off, knowing what they're having to face, the rolling blackouts, the troubles that they're having within their own government. So just staying abreast of all of those things, I think, is really important.
This board is actually...
when visiting suppliers for her company MailPow for the first time in China, Crystal Martin says she was surprised at what was important to her hosts and wasn't prepared for some of the cultural exchanges.
For me, it was very interesting because we stayed in a sort of American-ish hotel in Shenzhen, and the owner of the factory would come and pick us up in his little rundown Honda car. And he was so proud of that he was the one physically coming and picking us up to take us to the factory. First of all, having the owner waste all that time to come over and pick us up is like, what? Why wouldn't you send someone that you're paying $1 an hour, And two, this car was a piece of trash. Literally the back seats were all torn up, and, I'm kind of giving Doug this look like, oh my Lord. But he was so proud of that and being able to come over and get us. They were very proud at lunchtime to go get us KFC and bring it back in. And it was like, handing us the chicken nuggets, and the French fries was like, la-da, like they were just giving us this 5-star meal. And they do hand over business cards. It's very much, I didn't realize it. I didn't bring business cards. I thought, who would want my American business card in China? We Skype, we do things like that. What do they care, what my physical address is in America? And so I didn't bring business cards, and it was this weird sort of awkward moment where they're handing me their business cards and I'm kind of scrawling something on a piece of paper to hand back to them.
Business cards and fried chicken aside, the relationship is paramount in countries like China and often takes time to build.
The business culture is such that the relationship is more important than anything else. It's more important than the contract. It's more important than the law. And so really in China, people spend a tremendous amount of time building a personal relationship with their customers or their suppliers in China. And it frustrates Western business people often because it can take 3 visits or 4 visits before you really begin to talk about business, not only from the U.S. government.
Eric Ryan runs Ryan Technologies out of Santa Barbara and has extensive experience in China.
I've been in business in China for 20 years. I started in 1988 working there. I started my own business in 1992, primarily distributing U.S. and European products into China. And over the years, we've become more and more specialized around security screening technologies and also forensic technologies. And so we now are the largest distributor of those technologies into the China market.
Eric says when it comes to international contracts, there are often government agencies in the United States or in the country you're dealing with to help.
The standard international trade agreements in China are actually fairly formal and very standardized language, and those are usually drafted and presented by what's called a foreign trade corporation, which sounds like a private company, but actually it's a quasi-government agency in China that their job is really to facilitate international trade. And so a Chinese buyer will come to the Foreign Trade Corporation and they will give their local currency, renminbi or Chinese yuan, to the Foreign Trade Corporation. The Foreign Trade Corporation will then make the currency exchange into US dollars or open a letter of credit in order to be able to do the international transaction. And so they are the ones that are also drafting the contracts. But in the negotiation process, the contract can certainly be modified and specific terms for your case can be put into place. Memorandums can be attached to clarify expectations. And so there is a typical negotiation process just like here. But again, in most cases in China, once the contract is done and signed, nobody looks at it again because everybody goes back to focusing on the relationship.
With a contract in place, the logistics of getting goods to and from a country has been made easier in recent years.
It used to be 15 years ago that to get anything in and out of China required days in customs and a whole lot of running around. Now all of the logistics companies, whether it's DHL or FedEx or UPS, all have very well-established warehouses and customs processing, and so it's actually gotten very easy to be able to move product in and out of China.
Yeah,
All of the entrepreneurs agree, no matter the country, building relationships and a cross-cultural understanding is both the most challenging and the most rewarding part of doing business globally.
Because business is social. You know, of course it's business, you know, there's the math part, there's the logistics part, but business is social. So at some point, you've got to set that wisdom aside and let foolishness just take over.
It's about relationships. And I think it's not so much about whether it's a plastic eraser or a paddle. It's about relationships and people at the end of the day.
Both the experience of starting a business as well as the experience of interacting with another culture really changes your whole worldview. You know, I think once somebody starts an entrepreneurial enterprise, it's very difficult for them to go back and just work in a job, in a cubicle in any business, because you don't think about the world and your contribution to it in the same way once you've learned to kind of come up with an idea and make it into reality and to be able to sell that idea.
In the next installment, internationalizing your website, online protocols, and which social media will be best for your business.